Hi everyone, it's Paul again from the MIA, bringing you another update. First of all, hope you're all still safe and well and enjoying working from home, as many of you are. Many of you may know that last week we did a webinar, which if you missed it is still on the website, but it was a great interview with Nikki Gledow, all about employment law and HR advice for the industry. And we had loads of positive comments about do another one. So here we are doing another one. This time we're going to choose the subject of support for business more in a commercial sense and accounting sense. And we're going to try and cover subjects as varied as grants, loans, VAT, tax, PAYE, all drawn from the latest government news, which, as many of you now realise, is a very fluid situation, and news updates are coming in by the day. And we're putting as many of them as we can on the special box on the homepage of the MIA website. So even what we say today might become out of date by tomorrow. So do keep updated to our box, and we'll keep you updated in return. But anyway, let's get down to business. We've worked with DA Clark, Chartered Accountant, for years, and they have many clients, including many in our industry. And we're very lucky to be able to have secured the boss, Sarah Clark, today to talk to us about the matters in hand. So without any further ado, Sarah, over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Much appreciated. Good to be with you here today. I hope everyone can hear and everything okay, and we will post some details at the end on how you can catch up on some of the links that we might have mentioned while I'm speaking. So don't worry about writing things down, because I'm sure Paul will cover that at the end anyway. So down to business then, yes. As you're all more than aware, I'm sure, if you're running your own businesses, that cash flow is probably the most imperative thing at the moment. What we are trying to do, and what the government is trying to do, and every business is trying to do, is to stay afloat during the next few weeks, few months, however long the current situation is going to last. So preserving your cash flow is what the government is trying to do with all the initiatives that it's put forward. And to be fair, I actually think it's done a pretty good job. There are lots of things out there, so I will go through them. And like I said, if you've got any questions or anything, I'm sure Paul can take them at the end. And there's a lot more information online if you need any more details. So I'm going to sort of do it in a continuity point of view, because it's going to be easier for me. So I'm going to start right at the very beginning, back at the beginning of March, when all of this started, and you might have had employees off sick, or your business might have started to have less shoppers in the shops if you're a retail business. So the very first thing I would look at is whether or not your business is suitable to apply for a business interruption insurance. So this is a claim off your own insurance, because your trading conditions weren't as good as they might normally have been because of the coronavirus outbreak. You may well have a reason to claim from your insurance policy, and that could then bring some of your lost revenue back into your shop. Don't forget, you are eligible for this before the shops were closed, which is the most important thing, because there's lots you can do once the store's closed, but this would be actually in the couple of weeks before you actually closed. Secondly, on this is probably the day when everyone was told to close shops, which is obviously very difficult for the retail trade, and obviously the other trades and sectors involved with the retailers as well. The biggest cost, I think, probably to almost any business will be your employees. And I know that Nikki Gledow actually covered this in her webinar last week, so I won't go into a lot of detail because it's still there to view. But don't forget, you obviously can furlough your employees that you might have otherwise had to make redundant. Don't forget also, it can be backdated to the date the shops were closed, so it doesn't have to just be from the date that you were told you could do it. And also, one other thing which I think quite a few people forget is, if actually you've already made staff redundant because of the corona outbreak, you can actually reinstate them and then furlough them, so that they actually are paid the 80% of their wages while all of this is going on, which can be a lifeline, obviously, to any people that have already been made redundant. So have a look at this, and like I said, more information on Nikki Gledow's webinar from last week. So that's the job retention scheme. There's a government loan scheme as well available. Quite a few banks have got on board. I believe there's something like over 30 or 40 high street banks that will give this service. They are going to pay the first 12 months interest so that there's no cost to the business. Obviously, the loan will still need to be repaid. So it is a loan, it is not a grant. The government will guarantee 80% of the loan, but some of the banks are actually asking for personal guarantees as well as the government-backed guarantee as well. So just make sure you shop around and get the best one that's suitable for you. The wording that I've heard off the streets, as it were, is that NatWest and RBS are at the moment being the most helpful and asking for the least guarantees. But like I said, do shop around because, as Paul said, this changes on a daily basis. VAT next. Everybody is allowed to defer their VAT payment that is due between the 20th of March and the 30th of June this year. That payment is deferred until the 31st of March 2021, and at that point will then need to be repaid. So it is not a complete write-off, it is a deferment, so it will need to be paid eventually. You don't have to do anything to do this. You don't have to apply anyway. You don't even have to tell HMRC. You don't have to ring the helpline. You just don't pay. First time ever you'll hear an accountant say, don't pay your VAT, so make use of it. Don't forget also, if your business is registered for direct debit for VAT, you have to cancel your direct debit, otherwise it will be taken. So if you want to take advantage of this, cancel your direct debit and don't pay your VAT that's due between the 20th of March and the 30th of June. So that should cover everybody's VAT quarter at least once, because obviously people have different VAT quarters. The other thing HMRC have done is they have put a very good helpline together for payment of any other HMRC bills, so such as PAYE or your corporation tax bill. And if you ring them up, and again, we'll put the helpline number at the end, they will arrange a time to pay. So again, they're not writing the loan off, but the payment off, but they will give you time to pay it. And in the past, this has been very, very difficult to get from HMRC. They don't grant time to pays very easily, but at the moment they are promising, and actually from what I've heard from clients, they're doing a good job and they're actually responding very quickly and not asking too many questions and deferring payments from everyone that asks. So I haven't actually heard of anyone being turned down yet. I'm sure there's a first. The government has also promised that commercial leases will not have, you can't be evicted, from a commercial lease, so you'll be protected from eviction if you are not paying your rent. Now this I've checked and it is definitely in the case for commercial leases, and I believe the same is for a residential lease as well, but we're not talking about that today. So commercial leases are okay. So if you're not paying your rent for any reason, you are protected until at least June 2020. Rates, the government has done a lot to do with business rates. They have given a 12-month business holiday, 12-month rates holiday for all businesses in the retail, leisure and hospitality sectors. So all retail shops, no matter what level of rates you pay, you will not have to pay any rates for the next year. On top of this, there are also 2 grant schemes that have been awarded based on the rates you pay. So if you pay low rates, so you're subject to the small business rates relief, which basically means you pay little or no rates, you will get a one-off £10,000 grant. And that's not specific to any sector. So actually is across all business types. If your rates are between £15,000 and £51,000, then you will get a £25,000 grant, but this is restricted to the retail, leisure and hospitality, so not necessarily across all businesses. SSP, when the employment allowance came in a few years ago, it meant that businesses couldn't claim their SSP back from the government because the employment allowance was there instead. What they've now said is that for this period only, while the virus is affecting us all, they will pay the SSP paid to staff. You can claim it back as a one-off for up to 2 weeks per employee. So that hopefully will help any of the costs from having absences from work. This is only for small and medium businesses, so those with less than 250 employees. Talking about employment allowances, the employment allowance currently is £3,000 a year and can be claimed by all businesses running a payroll. through a PAYE scheme. Don't forget though, if you have more than one business owned by the same people, only one person in that group can claim the allowance. It's not across every business if you're part of a group of businesses. The employment allowance of £3,000 is being increased to £4,000 with effect from April 2020. If you have a payroll provider doing your payroll for you, you'll probably find this is automatic, because when the payroll is sent off, the employment allowance is automatically ticked, but just make sure that you're getting it if you're running your own payroll and that you've claimed it back. Any large companies, which I don't know how many of you out there are listening to this, but just in case there are, there's a corporate financing facility where the government will buy short-term debt. Now, this is a very restricted service because it is only for very large companies, and more details are on the Bank of England's website as to what the eligibility criteria are. But like I said, it probably doesn't affect too many watching today because it's only for large companies. The government and Companies House together have issued a 3-month extension to filing your company's accounts, but it has to be due to the corona outbreak and health reasons. It can't just be, unfortunately, because you've forgotten. The 3-month extension apparently is through a nice, easy process online. Apparently will take around about 15 minutes, so not too bad, and is accessible directly from the gov.uk website. So very easy. They will give an automatic 2-month extension and have an extra 1 month if they think it is warranted. So worth doing if you're struggling to file and avoid a penalty. Just so you know, the living wage is going ahead from April 2020. It has been in the pipeline for a while, but it is definitely going ahead. And this increase is going up to £8.72 from £8.21 for the over 25s. Obviously, there are other rates applicable depending on age groups. And again, these are all available on gov.uk website. And this changes from the 1st of April 2020, so from Wednesday. So make sure your payrolls are updated to include it if necessary. There are some other things you can do to help with cash flow in businesses. They've been around for a long time, but again, sometimes people forget the things that are already there when the government's bringing all the new things in. 2 things that are worth a mention. One is asset financing and one is factoring. If you factor your invoices, it means that you basically sell the invoice, your sales invoices, to a factoring company. They pay you immediately, somewhere around about 80% of the value on the invoice, and then you get the further 20% when the customer pays you. Now, it's been around, like I said, for years. There are plenty of high street banks and other lenders that do this, but it obviously has an immediate cash flow advantage because the first time you do your factoring, you get the value of your invoices up front, straight into your bank account. So if you are having cash flow problems, it is quite a good way of getting a sudden input of cash. But just remember, of course, that at some point you may wish to buy yourself out at the end, or you have to continue factoring for a length of time. So it is a slightly more permanent solution, but should be considered. The other thing is asset financing. It tends to be used by companies and manufacturers and people with high levels of equipment, which might not apply to too many listening today. But if you're part of a manufacturing line or you've got lots of high value, sometimes it's worth effectively selling these to a finance company, and then they rent them back to you. Make sure you look very carefully for your providers, because there are a few out there that are particularly bad with their interest rates and what they charge. So go to a reputable lender to do this, not somebody less reputable, please. If your employees are working from home, like a lot of us are at the moment, they might find that they have increased bills with their light and their heat and being at home all the time. The government have a recommended amount you can pay your employees if they're working from home. Currently, this is £4 per week, but it's due to rise to £6 per week from April 2020. All they have to do, if your staff wish to claim it, is to do an expense claim form with however many weeks at whatever rate is applicable for the time period, and then you can just make that payment to them, and it goes against on your P&L as a cost, so is offsettable against corporation tax. Perfectly legitimate, and those are the HMRC rates that I've quoted, so they're the correct ones to use at the current time. While we're talking about your employees, then there are some things they can do themselves if they're having cash flow difficulties. And I appreciate for some people it's a difficult time, especially if, for instance, they're only receiving 80% of their normal wages, they might be struggling to cope at home as well. So the government announced a mortgage holiday, and you can have up to 3 months where you don't pay your mortgage payments. Obviously, again, this is not a grant, so you will eventually have to pay them. So it's only a deferment of the amount, but it still will help in the months where the wages are lower. It will help not to have any sort of mortgage payments to pay. Certainly something to be thought about. The government have also deferred the self-assessment payments that are due to be paid by the 31st of July 2020. If any of you are self-employed out there, you know that there are 2 payments to be paid per year, one in January and one in July. Well, the July 2020 payment that is due has been deferred to January 2021, which means you get an extra, whatever it is, months of credit from HMRC. Again, it is a deferment, it isn't a cancellation, so it still will need to be paid in January 21. The other thing to remember is they have also literally, I think it was last Friday, announced the self-employment package that has come out. So if any of your workers are self-employed, not PAYE, then they can make a claim for their self-employment loss that they've suffered. HMRC are doing this on similar terms to the furloughing of staff, where the self-employed will be given 80% of their normal take-home from their self-employment. This is quite difficult to work out, but what they've agreed is that they're going to take 3 years self-assessment for the self-employed person. So that's years 16, 17, 17, 18 and 18, 19 tax years. Add up the 3 years, divided by 3 to get an average, and then do a monthly amount, so i.e. divide by 12 of whatever that average is for the profit for the year, and then get an average profit per month, and then that is what the government will pay 80% of, and it's either that figure or £2,500, whichever is the lower. They will also, the restriction on it in that the profit for the self-employment must be less than £50,000 per year averaged. So if your self-employment profit is more than this, I'm afraid you won't be able to claim. HMRC are doing an automatic claim for you, so you do not have to contact them for this. It will be done by HMRC. They will contact you and they will give you a link to make the claim online. If you receive any information from any other source, so a phone call or an email or anything, ignore it, because it could be a scam. It has to come from .gov.uk to be legitimate HMRC, and just be careful, because unfortunately there are people out there that are scamming and asking for details when obviously you shouldn't be giving them. Along with the self-employed, you may also just remember that it's possible to increase your universal credits as well, so that if individuals are struggling, that might be something else that will be helpful. I think that's it from me. So just to recap, everything I've said today is just current guidelines. I don't know if it's going to change tomorrow, hopefully not, but it might. All of the details are on HMRC's gov.uk website, which Paul will put up somewhere so that you can find it. And I will also put up the helpline number in case any of you wish to contact HMRC. Thank you.
So that's brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. I can tell how precious it is by the number of alerts you've had during that talk.
Sorry.
Do you have the helpline HMRC number to shout out while you're there?
Yes, I do. So the number for HMRC is 0800 0159 559. That's 0800 0159 559.
Well, that's brilliant. I have to say, you answered nearly every question I had. The only other one I picked seminar I was at last week is that if you're eligible for a grant, the UK government will notify you directly. I believe, however, certainly in Scotland and in Wales, the onus is on the business to apply to their local authority to see if they're eligible. So there are certain differences coming in between the various rules around the territories of the UK. I think most of the employment law is the same throughout, but certainly some of the commercial practices we talked about today vary depending which territory you're in.
Oh, what did I do? Sorry. Yes.
Sarah, once again, thank you very much for that. As for our viewers, hopefully we've got some. I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope you found it useful. We're planning to do these as often as you need them in the industry. So please let us know of any other additional subjects you'd like us to do, and we'll get them covered. But in the meantime, from Sarah and I, stay safe, get in touch if we can be of any support to you, and many, many thanks for watching. Bye then.
Bye.